bad people can be right sometimes. The fact that a bad person says something doesn't automatically mean it's wrong. As Ayn Rand said, reality is the final arbiter. But the fact that bad people are strongly opposed to something might make you try to think about it a bit more and see, what is it about their view of what's right and wrong that makes them think this is wrong. Hopefully, people will be doing that with the recent plan. Again, I use that word very loosely, that Donald Trump kind of suggested in the press conference with Netanyahu, the plan to move Gazans out of Gaza. All of them, most of them, not really sure. Where, not really sure. Rebuild Gaza, for whom, not really sure. But I have to say, there's a context here, and we kind of touched on it yesterday. But the context is, uh, you know, every U.S. president in recent decades had a peace plan for the Middle East, and every single one of them, Democrat and Republican, to the extent that that peace plan was put into place, or parts of it were put into place, things got worse, and things got worse for Israel. Things got worse, obviously, for anybody who wants to live a good life in Gaza or Judea and Samaria, if on the West Bank of the Jordan River, if such people exist. Yeah, it was bad for good people and good, supposedly, for bad people. So, okay, let's talk about this a bit more. I think we'll talk about it a lot more. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by Daniel. I'm going to start by reading Christian's super chat. Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, the idea is that families voluntarily leave Gaza. There won't be forced deportations of civilians because international law and Israeli public won't allow it. But leftist Israeli haters freak out. Yeah, I mean, the reactions. Well, the reality show today is about the reactions from around the world. Some of the reactions I saw from Israel are, um, mixed, let's say. People, obviously, the most common one, and we see this in the chat as well, is it's not going to happen. But that's neither here nor there. Should it happen is the first question we should ask, and then how can it happen? And then, if it can, how do we do it? But I did see one particularly despicable Israeli politician, former politician, Zehava Galon. Some of you who follow Israeli politics closely will know who she is. She's the former head of Meretz. And she said, "Oh, I see people talking about why why it is not going to work, but nobody's talking about how it's immoral." And that's the thing here. For the left, it is actually immoral to win this war that the Palestinians exist in order to have. And yeah, that should raise questions among people. If the left is so against it, why? Daniel.
Well, I want to comment on a few things first. First, just about the idea that even like bad person can be right. So my sort of biggest worry with this problem is the sort of epistemological problem. Is that there is not a correct understanding why this needs to happen. Like the goal is like pretty much what we've been saying for since October 7, or since we started talking about post-war Gaza plan. Like the plan is the closest thing we currently have and we ever had to like sort of like a proper solution to this. My sort of problem is if you don't have the right understanding of why it's a proper solution, it might hinder sort of progress of this. Then when people say if this will or won't happen, I mean the big question is there is no other choice. This has to happen. Some type of this plan has to happen. There is no sort of other solution. Now, when it comes to sort of the idea of voluntary deportation, something to sort of remember is we still have no idea what this plan really is. Sort of, it's just a general idea so far, and Trump at the first time said it could involve pretty much deporting, he said 1.8 million people. But I think he also said it could include like every single Palestinian from Gaza. Now, if I think sort of trying to defend Trump's plan with saying, well, only there will be only voluntary deportations. I think at some point you have to accept there might be forced deportations, and it might be something that is necessary to do. I don't think, especially if I have no idea how many Palestinians want to leave Gaza. But if it's small number, then we haven't really solved anything. Not to mention a large, pretty much this plan will have a pushback against from the whole world. The Arab world wants to keep Palestinians in because they are directly threatening Israel. And the sort of Western world is against this plan because we have no conception of what it means to actually deal with any sort of issue at all. So, I mean, we'll go to the idea of ethnic cleansing and the way sort of this plan has been talked about. But sort of, I wouldn't shy away from mandatory deportations. It happened even in Israel in the past when Israel was founded because of Arab population largely joining the Arab states and fighting against Israel. Many of them got deported after the war. And some of them were integrated after military occupation into the Israeli society. But that's something that happens. It happens in the past, and I don't think we have to. Uh, I don't think we can shy away from it. It's sort of like you have to be prepared for something like that.
Yeah, I want to address some of the comments in the chat, and we will go to the specifics of the idea that this is ethnic cleansing. Um, so Davy Boy says, Gazans themselves mostly claim to be refugees right now. They can maintain this status elsewhere. Absolutely.
Well, there will be still problematic because the idea that they would still be refugees, meaning they would still go back at some point, and this is like it's like a
Well,
ridiculous idea. The fact that you have like millions of Palestinians around the world, like when it comes to Syrian refugees, they are being given citizenships in different countries. They are giving like permanent residences in current countries because the idea that they would go back to Syria is sort of ridiculous in some cases. And the idea that Palestinians from 80 years ago still somehow have a right to like go back is it's clearly like a political goal to destroy Israel. It's not realistic.
of course, but since they are considered refugees by themselves, by much of the international community, I think with an understanding that them having refugee status is a part of a piece of the puzzle of the destruction of Israel. Uh, yeah, if they want to keep calling themselves refugees, I won't agree with them, but I'll take it as long as they're gone. So that's the thing. Is this the perfect plan? No, it's far from it. Is this the best plan ever presented by anybody in the White House? Absolutely. This is the closest thing to good that we've ever heard from a U.S. president when it comes to the future of the Middle East. Susie says in the chat, they lost the war. They lost the war. They started yet again, and they think they should have options. They will never change if they never have consequences. Absolutely, perfectly put. And Christian says, but civilians, families, the images would not be tolerated, not even in Israel. Those times are over. Well, the times of the West ever fighting a war to win are over, and that's something that should change before we all speak Arabic and or Russian and live under totalitarianism. So yes, I mean, the images might be heartbreaking and they would look terrible out of context, and most people will, of course, drop context because that is necessary for their ideology. But yeah, civilians suffer the consequences of their political leadership. Even if everywhere in the world, in the U.S., you suffer the consequences of there being, taxes in a welfare state and whatever. You suffer those consequences elsewhere. Yeah, and this is not, this is definitely not a net negative. Let's put it that way. This is a war that has just been getting worse and worse over the past few decades as Israel, strongly encouraged by the US, even more strongly encouraged by the rest of the world, keeps capitulating further and further towards the savages, and its situation gets worse, and it will lead to its ultimate demise. This will, at the very least, be a form of actual pushback. Now, I also have to say, I'm not sure you're right about that, Christian. I mean, look, Israel gets attacked more when the more it is apologetic about what it does. And we saw this with, the first few weeks and months of the operation in Gaza, and we didn't see it as much when Israel went with not full force, but more force in Lebanon, against Iran, against the Houthis. So yeah, I'm not sure that's true, but that's something that um, it's a absolutely acceptable price to pay if the alternative is annihilation, and that is the alternative.
Yeah, and something Alex in the chat says, "Oh, come on, imagine. It's more heartbreaking for them to leave than it is for them to stay." And it's important to remember that it is nobody really cares about the well-being of Palestinians. Like the idea that like most of Gaza is like not enough, but most of it is like in rubble. If you like check it, and the idea that like staying for them is better than, again, we are talking about even if every single Palestinian has left Gaza, and now we have no idea, but let's accept even the number like 2 million. When it came to like Syrian refugee crisis, there was like millions of people, millions and millions, like spread around like most of the world, and it wasn't handled in the best possible way, but we sort of handled it, and now we it was something you just had to do. There was, in a sense, no other way, and the same thing has to be done. It has to be said like there is no other way out. We have to like get rid of these people. Like whenever they have a chance, they pretty much unite just to attack Israel. They literally don't do anything else. When they were given sort of Gaza back, let's call it that. When they were given Gaza, they used it exclusively to attack Israel. Whenever they have a chance, whenever Palestinians even leave Gaza or the West Bank of the Jordan River and go to Jordan, go to Egypt, they try to coup the government just so they can install their own sort of theocracy so they can attack Israel. So you just have to say they had a chance. This is it. They are all getting deported, and nations have to deal with it. You have 60, like 50 to 60 Muslim nations. They can spread it out among themselves. You have like European nations are so happy about the Palestinian cause. We can send 100,000 to Ireland if they are so happy with them. Like you just figure it out. Yeah, there is. I don't think there is any other way.
Yeah, I'm trying to fix my lighting situation here as people who are watching can see this.
Sorry, because I didn't finish my point. The idea that sort of people care about the suffering of Palestinians, like again, the idea that them staying in Gaza is sort of like more preferable than getting out and like spreading them out around the world. They don't care, and I don't care that much either. But sort of, yeah, and that's sort of like the way Trump is currently trying to put it. I've heard quotes from both Trump and Witkoff that the sort of I believe one big change specifically from Witkoff was when he was in Gaza and he saw the destruction, and he basically said like it's not like a humanitarian thing to like leave them in Gaza. It's much more preferable to like spread them out somewhere else and then rebuild Gaza. Now you see that nobody cares about this justification because nobody cares about the actual well-being of Palestinians. They only care about this like weird idea of them staying is somehow like the divine right or sort of the divine cause they have to do.
Yeah, and of course the idea that, if you rebuild Gaza and then bring them back, they'll somehow become civilized because they have nicer buildings. That's bullshit, and we know that because they had basically unlimited funds to do that if they wanted to, and that is not what they wanted to do. And again, they also had infrastructures, infrastructure infrastructure left by Jews who were forcibly deported, ethnically cleansed, if you will, from Gaza, and they went and destroyed that rather than use it. So, yeah. Anyway, ethnic cleansing. Let's start with a quote from Ayn Rand about the term ethnicity. This is the quote. Ethnicity is an anti-concept used as a disguise for the word racism, and it has no clearly definable meaning. The term ethnicity stresses the traditional rather than the psychological characteristics of a group, such as language, but not psychological, it stresses the traditional rather than physiological characteristics of a group, such as language, but physiology, i.e. race, is involved. So the advocacy of, quote, ethnicity means racism plus tradition, i.e. racism plus conformity, i.e. racism plus staleness. Ethnicity is not a valid consideration morally or politically and does not endow anyone with any special rights. And that is very much, so that's the end of the quote. That is very much uh, why such a term is used. Such a concept or anti-concept is used, and of course, used with, of course, the word cleansing, which has, in this context, a very unsavory kind of connotation. It sounds bad, and it sounds really, really bad, and therefore it is used. And again, this is not the first time. It's not Trump's plan that brought the accusation of ethnic cleansing to what is being done in Gaza. Israel has already been accused of it. It has been accused of it in when it moves the population from one area to the other so that they won't die when Israel tries to, defend itself to an extent. So the term itself is invalid, and again, that is why it is used. This is so to the question, is it ethnic cleansing? You know, to kind of use not exactly a quote by Rand, but I reject the premise. I reject the premise that that ethnic cleansing is a valid term. So yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, sort of to go back to Ayn Rand, similar, in a similar way, where ethnicity is an anti-concept, ethnic cleansing is also an anti-concept. Now, again, the purpose of an anti-concept is to basically delegitimize an actual concept. So when people say ethnic cleansing, what we are talking about it is basically mandatory deportation, or at first voluntary deportation, and then mandatory if needed. And they are saying, by saying ethnic cleansing, which again is like insanely normatively loaded, while it technically wouldn't have to be, but basically by saying ethnic cleansing, you're saying this is a bad thing. This is something that shouldn't happen. And when they use it here, it's used in a similar way. But again, what are we talking about here? We are talking about there is a population that supports a terrorist organization that has time and time again tried to spend all its resources just to attacking Israel. They've given up any sort of right to exist as a state. Legitimacy from a state comes from adherence to individual rights, comes from adherence to individual rights of your own people, and also to not break rights of other people. And uh, Gaza or Hamas doesn't have anything of that, and the Palestinian people don't have any care for individual rights. They've given up any sort of idea of statehood. They had it many times, and we have to accept like this is sort of what you get. I don't wanna completely draw a one-to-one comparison, but after the Second World War, Germans were deported from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from different countries around in the East, and were shipped back to Germany. That because they were used, that population, both in Czechoslovakia and Poland, were used against those nations by Germany, and that's sort of the consequences of the war. Again, Israel is not the one that like wants to be at war. Israel is not the one that wants to infinitely like have to deal with these problems. It's the Palestinian people, which again, going back to the idea of ethnicity being a legitimate concept. When we talk about Palestinians, it's purely a political designation that was created to destroy Israel. When Arab nations say they want to keep Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, respectively, it is not because they believe those people will be better off there. They want to use them. They want to use that population for attacking Israel. There is no other thing there.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Um, People who have been watching our channel since October 7th, well, we have two shows a day, so you may have missed it, but we have at least once, maybe more, discussed uh, something that's very similar to, I sometimes joke about how yeah, Trump watches the show, Bibi watches the show. I don't think that's actually the case, and maybe it's not even my funniest of my jokes, but this plan is not far from things we've been saying from early on. Yeah, if you actually want peace in the Middle East, then the population in Gaza cannot remain there. That is not a possibility. Yes, people have free will, and individuals in Gaza, maybe you can convince them to convince one or two of them to care about themselves. There is no, I'll put it this way, there is no historical precedent for a population like that becoming civilized quickly enough for peace to happen before they manage to exterminate the Jews. And that includes Germany and Japan. Nobody was at that level of savagery as the Palestinians currently are, and became civilized. And it's not something that Israel, being attacked all the time since it was created and before, not something that Israel has to put up with. So, of course, for me, it's a very clear, morally at least, a very clear issue that Israel absolutely has the right to kick out the population, and we have talked about it. I personally have advocated for this on the channel, and I like the fact that now it's you know a bit more mainstream, if not even if not too likely. Uh, Michael says in the chat, Jews were ethnically cleansed from Gaza, and it wasn't because they started a war, but it was to try and bring peace. It didn't work, and Israel had only problems since. Yeah, I mean, to the extent that you can use ethnic cleansing as a valid term, and certainly if it applies to to Trump's plan, it absolutely applies to the disengagement where Israel forcibly removed Jews from their homes in Gaza, all the Jews who lived in Gaza. Uh, there was no uproar. There were no headlines. It was families, Christian, as you put it. It was families being taken by force. I remember watching it. It was uncomfortable, and it was an injustice because it was essentially what every part of every peace plan for decades has been. The problem, Israel, in a sense, has always accepted that it is the barrier to peace, that it is the reason why Palestinians are terrorists, because, because there's an occupation in the West Bank and there's an occupation in Gaza. So they ended the so-called occupation of Gaza and got much more. Before that, the Oslo Accords, remember, the Oslo Accord, people kind of forget because it was, over 30 years ago. But as soon as the Oslo Accords were put into effect, immediately suicide bombings became a thing in Israel, a regular thing that they weren't before. They became a much more regular thing in the early 2000s when Ehud Barak, Israeli Prime Minister, offered Yasser Arafat everything he officially, on paper, in English, said that he wanted. Uh, Pretty much everything, and maybe and then some. And his response was, we will start the second intifada. We will make suicide bombings a daily thing. And again, it was years after this that Israel decided to force its population out of Gaza, to move its to remove all of its army out of Gaza. Every time Israel does this, it pays a very, very heavy price in human life. And yeah, again, this is a departure from that consistent doctrine, consistent across the board, left and right in the US, left and right in Israel, all agreed, maybe to varying degrees, that Israel is essentially the problem and should stop mistreating the Palestinians. And this is kind of a recognition that Israel's mistreating of the Palestinians is Israel existing, and that is what the Palestinians find unacceptable. And if you think Israel should continue to exist, it has to be with the Palestinians uh, going elsewhere.
Yeah, I'll just mention one quick thing. So Netanyahu is already preparing sort of for the voluntary migration. IDF has been instructed also to basically prepare for something. So we might, it's going to be also interesting since the ceasefire deal is technically still also in like in power, as well as there are supposed to be more negotiations about it, how it's gonna go into the second phase. So I'm wondering where we'll go from here. But I like I really like it so far. We'll see how we'll go from here. Just quickly, I'll mention about again the idea of ethnic cleansing. Also, to understand why it's an anti-concept, you can also check like every single deportation is almost by default like uh, ethnic cleansing, because you're always targeting some sort of group. You're always going after a certain individuals that have like I don't mean certain characteristic as in like race or something, but basically are part of something. That's what you're usually doing when it comes to sort of like mass deportations. And again, the idea of that this is ethnic cleansing and that's why it's bad. So if Gaza had like was like multicultural and it had like Hindus and Christians and whatever else, and they were just all united against Israel, would it somehow made it okay? Because now it's not ethnic cleansing; it's you're targeting a bunch of groups. Like it's clearly, it's clearly not that ethnic cleansing is the problem. That's just something easy you can sort of latch on to basically argue against Israel without actually looking at the core of what Israel is doing or what Trump's plan is for Gaza.
Yeah, I see people. Well, Christian said here that Caroline Glick is now a key advisor to Bibi. I didn't know that, but I did notice Trump mentioning a Caroline in the press conference and saying she's doing great work or something to that effect. And I thought, is that Caroline Glick? And I'm still not sure that is, but that's great news. Um, the Egypt amassing military along the border in violation of the treaty. Good. I want Egypt to violate the treaty. That is not a peace deal that should have happened, and I would like it to be broken. And I would like it to be broken while while Trump is in office, because I think that's gonna again, Trump is a loose cannon. I when I watch him and Bibi in a press conference, I'm very careful. I'm watching Trump to kind of see what policy he might pull out of his ass while talking, and whether or not it's good, and sometimes it is. But I'm also very carefully listening to Bibi, thinking, is he gonna say something accidentally that Trump will read something into and then decide to side with the Palestinians? So yeah, I hope I hope Egypt kind of shows the world that they are not on the good side of things, and we can kind of have a more clear dividing line between the civilized and the, let's say, uncivilized. Um,
Yeah, it would also be a good start for Trump to stop sending aid to Egypt, both
yeah,
military and humanitarian, because I'm not 100% sure now, but I think Egypt is like in like the second or third when it comes to like a recipient of foreign aid. I
yeah,
believe first is Israel, and I'm not sure if Ukraine has taken over, but I don't think so. So Egypt might be second, which is like again like
yeah. And
nonsensical.
they're getting that money for having peace with Israel. So if they violate it, I think even if they don't violate it, they shouldn't get that. But anyway, yeah. Look, as I mentioned, we were when um, Eitan Fishberger uh, found those Telegram groups of UNRWA teachers and published it on Twitter. We were, as far as I know, the first ones to do a video on it on YouTube. I still, haven't found anything that was done earlier. We had Eitan on, that was one of our most watched videos, but also, we were first in a sense on that. And the Trump plan, again, that's the Razi plan. It's Razi said it first. And we have a lot more up our sleeve. So if you like what we do, you want to support us, you want us to keep unofficially advising world leaders to make the whole world great again, then consider becoming a member. There's a link in the chat and in the description. You can sign up. We have membership levels from the low price of £10 a month to the also low price of £500 a month. It is worth it at all levels. So consider doing that. The conversation on this continues on the reality show, which starts in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you in a few minutes.